This week on the Byword, we are forcing each other to watch a favorite TV show of the other, and chaos will ensue. The Byword starts now. Ladies and gentlemen, nerds, welcome to episode 192 of the Nerd Byword podcast. I'm Dave, I'm here with my buddy Kris, and this week we are having an episode we like to call Watch My TV Show. Kris has selected a TV show he really adores and selected a favorite episode that he made me watch, and vice versa. What did we pick, and which episode did we choose, and how does each of us react to the other's favorite TV show? We'll find out in this week's Byword Big Talk. But first, it's time for... Kris, this was some heartbreaking news to me. What have you got?
Yeah, so on the podcast Salam Nerds, Raul Kohli confirmed that he was in the final running to become Reed Richards in MCU version of the Fantastic Four. The actor who's famous for roles like iZombie in The Fall of the House of Usher said of the situation, quote, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but I didn't get it is the important thing. But on good days, I see the Constantine. It will flare up once and again, and I love all of them. On good days, you're like, man, I'm wanted. People really want to see. You're the guy that people will shout out for anything. On bad days, it's a reminder that you're not the guy. You're not there. These are the roles you'll never get. So it's sweet and it's perspective. It's how you feel about yourself," end quote. And I realized this was a popular fan cast. I'm not familiar with his work. I haven't viewed either of those programs, but I know enough just by fan reaction how popular this guy is. Everything I've seen as far as interviews and statements it matches the vibe. Like I'm here for it. And it's just kind of brings back to memory. It refreshes me as to why they went the direction they did with Pedro Pascal. You get it. The perception of the MCU is that they're going through a rough patch, and so they're bringing in the star casting to try and resuscitate the perception of the MCU. But that doesn't mean that it's not. It doesn't hurt, you know.
Yeah, so this is sort of a difficult situation, because on the one way, Pedro Pascal really can do no wrong, right? I mean, he's sort of become America's dad in a lot of ways, right? With some of his more recent roles, and he's a very talented dude, so you cannot help but wish him all the best. On the other hand, he's also very much a person whose star has been on the rise for a while, and so he's very much a household name. And so I get the feeling a little bit that we're in a very different kind of phase of the MCU, and I'm not talking about like phase 4, phase 5, or whatever they're doing these days. I think we're in the phase now of the MCU where they actually are concerned with making sure they cast stars rather than casting people that they can make stars, you know? Like, if you look, for example, at Robert Downey Jr., a very talented actor, sure, but also an actor that nobody wanted to take a risk on there for a very long time because of his long history with drugs and going into rehab and having to be dropped from projects. And so they took a big risk on him, and that paid off. And if you look at some of the castings that they've done in the past, none of those were necessarily huge superstars, right? But I think with the MCU kind of having struggled a little bit in recent years to hit sort of the usual heights, they're now starting to maybe resort to a little bit of that, like, we want celebrity name recognition in our movie, you know? And I think that's really sad. So on the one hand, you know, you can't really fault them for the casting of Pedro Pascal, which is fine casting. But I'm not 100% convinced that it was casting for the purest of reasons, you know? And I think that Raul Kohli would have been a much more interesting casting in some ways. I find his performance in iZombie and The Fall of the House of Usher very, very interesting. And I think he's a really talented guy. And he is, in my book, somebody who is looking for that big break. I think he is somebody that the MCU could have made a star out of. He is very much a talented dude, and I think he would have worked marvelously, no pun intended, as Reed Richards. So I'm wondering if this is something we're seeing as a trend now, where the MCU is becoming less interested in casting people to make stars, and more interested in casting people that are already stars to add name recognition to their brand. In which case, that would be a sad trend for sure.
I think it's unfortunate too. It also brings to memory like they're just when I'm looking at the cast list now, they're going for the trendy picks, not necessarily the best picks. You have Pedro Pascal, as we talked about. Vanessa Kirby, I'm not familiar with at all. I think she's in The Crown, which is a popular show. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But then you have Eben Mosbachrak, who's in The Bear, which is one of the biggest shows of the past 5 years or so. So as much as I love him and love that show, that's a very trendy pick. And then you have Joseph Quinn from Johnny Storm, whose claim to fame is Stranger Things. So they're going for these trendy things and not necessarily the right thing. It's almost like your parents like trying to run a TikTok account. Like just let the kids take care of it. Like they know what's cool. It's so I think they're learning the wrong lessons here, and I think there's a bit of a crisis of faith on Marvel's behalf. And I said this the other day. I think that people need to realize that the MCU is based on comic books. And comic books as a whole are no stranger to dry spells. And I think we just need to accept that. So we had a couple of films that did not perform as well as we wanted to. One of those in the Marvels is for reasons outside of their control because of the idiocy of terminally online people. But there's no reason where you can't have like an ultimate universe type of situation come in and revitalize the MCU. And in both scenarios, in both mediums, you just have to trust in the people that you've put in the creative process.
I think that's absolutely fair and accurate. And sort of, shows going through lulls, creative endeavors, having to go through changes, and what casting indicates for the future is something I think both of our news stories have in common this week, Kris.
I mean, it's literally what DC is hoping to do right now.
I think DC's casting was extremely smart when it comes to Superman Legacy.
Because, I meant as far as revitalizing something with new and in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going off on a tangent, my man. I think that casting was very interesting and smart because even if you look at the actors, although they've had some successes under their belts, the main leads, right, for both Clark Kent and Lois Lane, they're not necessarily like super trendy right now or something, or like household names.
Like Brosnahan in particular, Marvelous Miss Maisel, that was huge like 5 years ago. Like it's cooled off since then.
Yes, exactly. And Brosnahan is so talented, right? And I think she is one of those people with that small screen success who has nothing but potential for the big screen. Like she could explode on the big screen. Like she could be a superstar easily, right? So I'm interested to seeing where that goes. Smart casting, I think.
Yeah. So speaking of transitions and castings. Dave, this is something that's very near and dear to our heart, and we're both very ambiguous about.
Yes, so Netflix obviously is going through a bit of upheaval with their Witcher television series, having announced, of course, the departure of Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia, and having cast Liam Hemsworth as his replacement for, I believe, seasons 4 and 5, with the plan currently being that season 5 will be the last season. Now, we've had a few set photos leak, far away and blurry, as is often the case, of Hemsworth, dressed up as the Witcher, which, a lot of people have looked at on social media with a collective shrug, I feel, has sort of been the reaction. And now, just recently, about a week ago, we got the first official look at Hemsworth as The Witcher, which is basically sort of an up close shot that was part of a trailer, I think, of just like his face. And yeah, you have the colored contacts, and you have the white hair, and it's all there, the square jaw. The whole thing just kind of feels very great value Witcher for some reason. I'm struggling a little bit with the image. I mean, let me put it this way, and I think I said this on social media as well. Obviously, costume and makeup did their job, right? It's a fine job to try to make Liam Hemsworth look like The Witcher. The question is very much not so much about the visual. The question is the acting, right? Can he sell this? That's what it's going to come down to. And I don't think a quick shot like this is going to convince anybody, right? What we need to see is we need to see him actually in action, right? And if Netflix is convinced that he can sell this, then they need to show us some kind of clip, some kind of trailer, something sooner rather than later. Because the collective vibe in the Witcher fandom doesn't seem horribly positive about this casting change. There's already a lot of ill feelings towards the show in some corners of the fandom because of the departures from the books. Take that or leave it. That's fine, whatever, right? But the casting change has been pretty jarring for people, especially because Cavill is such a champion of this franchise and such a fan himself. And so convince us sooner rather than later. And the fact that the makeup department and the costuming department is really good on The Witcher, that's not news. What we now need to see is we need to see some clips of Hemsworth actually acting as The Witcher, so some people can feel a little reassured that this casting change is actually going to go off without a hitch. It also doesn't help that some of the reports from behind the scenes have indicated that there was actually no screen test for Hemsworth, nor was there any kind of like chemistry tests, right? Like bringing the other actors in to see how he bounces off of, for example, Anya Chalotra, right? To see how he does. That's like the relationship that's like key in that show. And so not having done that is not smart, right? So it seems to be very much like we were just talking about, a casting that is based in large part on name recognition, right? And so that is a big concern. So, give us a little bit of footage that reassures us that this is going to work, if you really, really believe this is going to work, Netflix. Because a quick shot of him in costume is not convincing anybody yet.
Well, a lot to unpack here. I'm a super fan of this franchise, of this IP. I've read all the books, I've played the games. I'll say this in Hemsworth's defense: if you're going for pure aesthetics, he looks more physique-wise like Geralt from the games. He's like kind of like that tall, slender, kind of lanky build, where Cavill's Superman. So um, it's tough when you have on-screen adaptations, because it comes down to personal preference. If I want to see a carbon copy from page to screen, then I'll just read the book. I don't need carbon copy. I don't have problems that they've changed it. Is it telling me a good story? This has been my calling card since they first started making superhero movies and I started watching them. Is it a good story? You can diverge, because who wants the same thing? It's boring. Um, at the same time, no screen test is truly wild. But if there's a show that can withstand so much tumult and upheaval, it's probably this one. Because, not to bring X-Men into it, but you have the Beau DeMayo of it all, who was summarily fired from The Witcher before he was fired from X-Men 97. And the end result of that was quality work, in spite of the allegations that surfaced there and the rumors. Um, So I'm hopeful. Um, a little 13-second teaser of him looking us in the eye is not going to do anything for me. I need to know if he's going to be Geralt. Like, what's his chemistry with Ciri? What's his chemistry with Yen? What's his chemistry with Triss? Let's not leave Triss out of this. So yeah, I'm very, very. I love this stuff. If it's bad, I'm going to watch it because I love this stuff. I still give comic book movies the time of day, even if they're not the best, because it's something I love. But I'm hoping it's good, and we're all just kind of sitting around waiting. Like, we arrived at the party early, we're just ready for the party to start. So, like, is it going to be good?
That's really the key, right? I mean, many franchises have survived casting changes, and it's not even like Henry Cavill has been like the first person to play Geralt, right? I mean, we had the video games; that was a different voice actor. So it's very much possible to have more than one person play the character. But like I said, if you're convinced this change is positive and it's going to work, show us a little something,
Yeah.
so the fandom can be a little reassured. That's I think key here. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. That's it for Nerd News. Stick around. After a short break, we're going to be back with the Byword Big Talk, where we force each other to watch a TV show we haven't watched much of. So stick around. Ladies and gentle nerds, welcome back. It's time for Oh yeah, this week is something interesting. Kris and I each have selected a TV show that we were going to make the other watch. We picked a favorite episode, and from there, we are trying, I guess, to convince each other that this TV show is worth our time. Now, Kris, how would you like to proceed? Would you like me to talk about what you watched first, or vice versa?
Go ahead and serve up your weird, and then I'll serve up mine.
All right. So we begin as longtime listeners should no doubt be not surprised by, with some Doctor Who. I have been evangelizing for Doctor Who on this show for a while and trying to get Kris to watch it. And so I decided to select an episode that I thought would be a good entry point for Kris to maybe get into it. So a quick series description of the show. Doctor Who is a classic science fiction program with a cult following. The Doctor is a Time Lord, a time-traveling alien from a far-off planet who travels through time and space in a ship known by the acronym TARDIS. A TARDIS is a machine that is larger on the inside and is supposed to change its appearance based on its surroundings. The Doctor is also able to evolve his biology, so he appears as many different people throughout the series. The Doctor loves Earth, so he makes many trips there to save the planet and to enlist Earthlings as companions. And I am particularly partial to the tenure of one Stephen Moffat as showrunner and Matt Smith as the Doctor. And so I assigned to Kris the 11th Hour, which was the first episode of Matt Smith's tenure as the Doctor, and I think a great jumping on point for newcomers. So, Kris, let's go ahead and talk about the 11th Hour. First of all, what did you like most about this episode of Doctor Who?
Um, Honestly, we're gonna cut right to the chase. It was the speech at the end, like where the Doctor goes, "I'm Earth's protector, and what are you gonna do about it?" In other words, run. And so, like, after this whole big invasion, but like that's cutting to the chase. I think um the chemistry between Matt Smith and Karen Gillan is undeniable. I can see why, even after all these years, there's such a fondness in the fandom. I have a peripheral appreciation of Doctor Who. I have lots of friends who are Whovians, um, and so like I get it. Like I get it now, seeing it. Um, so that was really cool, and just the the absent-minded professor vibes that Matt Smith brings to the role is really, really cool. A marked change from what Chris Eccleston did, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a different thing. Um, so it was kind of cool to see they really lead into the shape-shifting aspect because he's a completely different person, different style of actor and everything.
And this is one of my favorite things I think about the Matt Smith era generally. I think at casting, Matt Smith was the youngest person ever cast as the Doctor, and that was a big uproar about that, about whether that was a smart move. And what they ended up doing is they kind of went for a vibe that was old man stuck in a young man's
Hmm.
body, right? And as that run progressed, that became more and more obvious that he was just this incredibly ancient dude, and he just looks really young, and he likes to play act at being young, but there's like a whole different layer underneath all of that. And peeling all of that back was just a really, really fun performance, and I can't imagine anybody doing that better than Matt Smith.
Let's and
And
let's
yeah,
and
you're
let's
exactly
and let's
right.
be real. Like Matt Smith's facial structure kind of lends itself to that.
It does. It does. And yeah, I think Karen Gillan is a huge part of why this era clicked so well. She's obviously a huge talent, and her star has been nothing but on the rise since her tenure on Doctor Who. But going back to that time is always a lot of fun because, like you said, her chemistry with Matt Smith is through the roof, and Arthur Darwell too. You don't get a lot of him in the 11th hour, but that is part of this. The storyline progresses a little bit. Those three really become sort of the backbone of that whole era of Doctor Who. And there's a lot of chemistry between the three and how they play off of each other, a playfulness that some eras I think lack. So yeah, I can totally see why you appreciated that. All right, Kris, what do you think could have been better? And please talk about special effects if you must.
No, like I've seen the first 6 episodes of Eccleston, so like I get that. Like I knew what I was coming for. So I think maybe as a father, maybe as an educator, I'm hyper vigilant about things like this. But the vibes between the Doctor and Amy were not great. He met her when she was a child, and now like they have these long lasting stares. Makes me a little uncomfortable. Not gonna lie.
That is actually a really good point. And if you decide to go further into the show, and particularly into that first series, the first season of Matt Smith's tenure, that is sort of the Amy having a childhood crush on the Doctor thing that she's gonna work through within like a couple of episodes.
Hmm.
And they really just are very, very good friends, right? So that is
Okay, good.
a very one sided thing. It's not nearly as creepy as it seems. She's gonna have to work through that childhood crush infatuation thing very quickly. So what surprised you the most about this episode of Doctor Who, especially considering that you had, watched a little bit of it before in the Eccleston era?
It surprised me because of how wonky and just crazy some of the storytelling aspects are. This is like sci-fi turned up to 11. It surprised me how cohesive the plot was for this episode. Because like I'm like, why are we at this hospital? What are we doing? What are we doing? And for all of it to tie together, as zany and crazy as it got, it was pretty cool to see all that tied together. So that was the biggest surprise.
It's interesting you say that because that is another hallmark, I think, sort of the Moffat era, is just that he is the wheels within wheels guy, and as things progress, one of the things they talk about in this first episode is the crack in Amy's room,
Yeah.
right? The crack in the wall, and that actually is going to be a through line through the
Well,
entire
you saw
series
it.
and
You
ties up in
saw
the
it on
series
the.
finale.
You saw it on the monitor at the end of the episode.
Yes, yes, and so Moffat is the guy, sometimes more successfully than others, but I think in this first season, probably the most successful, where he does a lot of stuff that you're not sure what the point of that is, and then it all just kind of loops back together into each other, and it creates this really cool storytelling tapestry. And that level of complexity isn't always there with other showrunners or other Doctor Who writers. They have other preferences, I guess, in their storytelling, but that is something that I appreciate about Moffat's writing, and this first series is a masterclass of that. Um, man, I wish I could talk about a couple of later episodes. There's a two-parter where he does something really cool. Maybe we can talk about it sometime if you decide to watch some more. It's really really interesting how he weaves his storytelling together to create this really cool tapestry. It's very neat. I like it a lot. Now, I try to avoid this problem for you, Kris, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Did you encounter any continuity issues watching an episode of a TV show that started in 1963?
Not really, surprisingly enough. I think part of the ethos of Doctor Who kind of lends itself to. Okay, so watching Doctor Who as a newcomer feels a lot like you're being pushed into a moving car and just yelled at to buckle up, because there's no time. And so I think the inherent nature of a time traveler and a shapeshifter lends itself to new starting points. And so that makes it kind of newcomer friendly in the weirdest, most chaotic way.
I think that's absolutely fair. I was really lucky, I think, in that I got to Doctor Who when the show relaunched with Eccleston, and for me it was just kind of a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I encountered things that I thought were interesting, I would punt back and start watching classic Doctor Who to fill in the gaps. And I think that's a fair way to get to the show. But now that even the relaunch has been running for years and years, it's kind of hard to find the perfect sort of entry point. And I think part of it is just kind of it's good to have, I guess, a friend who's a bit of a guide of that
Yeah.
and has known some Doctor Who, because they can say, "Hey, listen, tell me what kind of stuff you like," and I can point at the era of Doctor Who that kind of does that, or the actor playing the Doctor that kind of embodies that, you know. And I think, to me at least, as a fan, I think the Matt Smith era is a very very good entry point. Unlike, let's say, the David Tennant era, right? Like, so you have Eccleston for a season, right, and then he regenerates, and you've got Tennant. Well, Tennant's first episode is basically a continuation of Eccleston's story, the same supporting cast, the same
Mm-hmm.
companion, and in fact, Tennant's first episode, for his first episode, which was a Christmas special, he is recuperating in a bed for like 90% of the episode. So it's not really a good introduction for who he is as a doctor, and you have to know the supporting cast already, because the episode is mostly about the supporting cast, right?
Right.
But Smith is a much cleaner break, I think. And so the people that are sort of held up from modern Doctor Who as sort of pinnacles are Tennant, who doesn't really have a great entry point, and Smith, who has a fantastic clean break entry point. You have to basically know nothing,
Yeah.
and you can walk in there and kind of find your way. So I'm glad that you were able to not have to deal with any major continuity problems, because there are entry points you could take where it would be quite messy.
That's fair.
So then here comes the big question. You have dabbled in Eccleston, and now I've made you dabble in Smith. Can you finally see yourself actually leaning in and watching a whole season of this stuff?
Oh yeah, like I plan to. I don't know. I don't want to commit and then have to back out on it. But there's so much I have to watch still. But I definitely plan to resume the Eccleston, and I'm just a completionist in that way. And picking up where I left off with Eccleston and just doing a straight shot.
So between the two, just to add a bonus question here for you, and talking about this, between the two, whose performance so far as the Doctor do you enjoy more? I mean, they're very very
They
different,
are
and if you say
very
they're
different.
different, but they're both fine, you know. But I'm just curious.
It's strange because even with my newness to Doctor Who, I still have a love for each of them. Part of mine is still holding out for the great what if of Eccleston as Malekith the Accursed. um, Not gonna lie, because that could have
he's
been perfect if they would have actually done it
he's
right.
such a talented dude. He is such a talented dude, man.
He has this weird, crazy, neurotic energy, but it's I love how, and this is gonna sound bad. I love how mean he is. like like Matt Smith's doctor is a little bit more doting and caring, at least in this episode that I've seen. Um, I just can't get past Mickey the idiot. That just makes me happy, especially when you see what that actor went on to do and be alleged of doing. I'm very happy to call him Mickey the idiot. So, also um, like Billy Piper, like I think the world of her. So, like that's the main reason I'm coming back as well.
I tell you, if you like mean doctors, I can't wait for you to get to Peter Capaldi because
Oh, that's the whole reason. Like I'm even considering this because, like I said, I'm still mad he left the Musketeers, the best Dumas screen adaptation I'll ever get. But that, yeah, I'm gonna see if the grass was indeed greener.
what basically when they talk about old man yelling at cloud, that's basically Peter Capaldi's doctor. It is the grumpiest old man you've ever met. They even talk about, fans like to talk about his attack eyebrows. Like he's so stern as the doctor for a while that his eyebrows basically scare you. He is so good in the role, and it takes the Matt Smith is the old man in a young man's body, and then there's Capaldi, who's just an old grumpy man who's just sick of it all, and he's so good in the role. He really is. All right, so final verdict, Kris. 11th Hour, if you had to grade it, what kind of grade would you give the episode?
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with the A minus. I still have those uncomfortable feelings about the relationship. I'm happy to revisit it after viewing the future episodes and see how that resolves. But just the cohesive nature, I'm always a sucker for like and what are you gonna do about it speech. Um, Coupling that with like the montage of classic Doctor Who was really really cool. So yeah, I'm gonna go A minus on this one.
Oh man, if you like that speech, Matt Smith is one of those doctors that gives some of the best speeches. Like there are several.
I'm a double Leo. I'm always here for a dramatic monologue.
Well, there are several for him, so that's going to be a highlight for you when you get there. All right, I'm going to punt it to you, so we can talk about. We can talk about what you made me go through last night.
Yo, okay, I resent that. Okay, so you are a fan of weird stuff, you're a fan of horror, you're a fan of the occult. So we are finally getting you to sit down and watch one of the greatest shows of the past decade, and that is What We Do in the Shadows, Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi's baby. So I could have easily just gone with a pilot, but that's boring. Um, so I went with one of my favorite episodes that I consulted with fellow fans of the show and said that's a decent enough starting point. You get the vibes of everything you need from this show. So if you're not familiar with this show, this is basically The Office with vampires. Like it's a documentary show, or Parks and Rec. It's a documentary crew that follows around vampires living in Staten Island. And this particular episode, Baron Afanas, who is like this patriarch overlord, vampire overlord, is coming to stay with these vampires, and they're very unnerved by him. Um, so I'm going to read the synopsis here. The Baron awakens from his slumber and demands to experience the wonders of the new world in a night out on the town. Directed by Jackie Van Beek. Writers were Jermaine Clement, Taika Waititi, Ian Morris. We have the stars, Kevin Novak, Matt Berry, Natasha Demetro, Harvey Guillen, Mark Proch, and the incomparable Doug Jones as Baron Afanas. So, Dave, we're going to start at the very beginning. What did you like most about the episode?
Before I talk about what I like most about this episode, I want to just go ahead and say that you are now officially done giving me about the new Dead Guardians.
I evolved the weirdness. I was like, oh, you want to get weird? Let's get weird.
You really did. I did not expect this. I did not expect this to be that weird. Yeah, I was a bit taken aback because you're always like, oh yeah, Dave, you like the weird stuff, and then you hit me with this, and I'm like, where did this come from? Like, holy crap, dude!
That's my secret, Dave. I've always been weird.
So yeah, what did I like most about this? This crap was funny, like, but funny in a way that I wasn't sure at the beginning if it was supposed to be funny. Like I was just really like confused for a solid like 3 minutes at the start of this. Like, is this a comedy? Is this supposed to be funny? Because this is hilarious in a like this is almost like Mystery Science Theater 3000 funny. Like there's an awkwardness in the way this is written that feels like B movie level. I guess the best way to put it is that these vampires think that they are so cool and they're so bad, but they are so awkward that it brings that perfect B movie level vibe out. Like a lot of those B movies think they're so cool and they're awesome, but they're just awkward, and it's exactly that. So it's a type of humor that I really, really just vibe with, and I laughed a lot. It's also the first thing that I watched in a long time where I had to Google a term that got brought up in a joke. They're like sitting around the table, and the Baron's like, you know what I'd like to try? And this one guy says something, and I'm like, what? And I had to look it up, and it's like, oh, he's into pooping. Great. I didn't need that today. So I actually had to Google the joke. So that's pretty unusual for me. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this humor. And I'm gonna tell you, honestly, I know this is a real big thing with The Office and everything, and everybody holds up The Office as this like super awesome show. I never have been a huge fan of the conceit of like the documentary crew is filming us, and that's why we can do testimonials directly to the camera.
Until the Baron kills one of your sound guys.
That is exactly right. I never vibed with that joke, and then they're all like, "I'm sorry that the Baron killed your sound, ate your
and
sound
the attention
guy."
to detail as the sound is going out.
The sound cuts off. Yep. And I was like, "Oh, they're actually doing something interesting with this. They're not just using this as an excuse for the actors to talk directly to the camera. Now I can have fun with this." So yeah, I was quite taken with the humor in this. I really, really liked it.
Okay, so now let's flip that. And what do you think could have been better?
You know, this might be more a answer to a different question, but I found myself really struggling to understand who these people are. I guess, and maybe that is because I'm in being dumped into an episode that's further into the first season or something, and I don't have the groundwork, that's been already laid. But I didn't quite get the dynamics. It took me a little while to catch on that two of these vampires were in a relationship. I ended up going on there and Googling, and they're supposed to be married, okay. And like the guy that dresses like the whitest guy you've ever met, I wasn't sure if he's even a vampire or not, or if he's like a human underling, because they really didn't lean into
that. There's the rub, and maybe a tease for you to watch more. He's a psychic vampire, so he bores people to tears, and that's how he feeds.
I know some people like that in real life. So that is whatever. I guess getting a hold of who the characters are was really, really difficult. Now this is obviously like sitcom length. Some of the episodes are like 20 minutes, some of them are like 30 minutes, and it's pretty fast moving. So not having seen the pilot was probably more the problem there than anything else. But I almost feel like, how they used to do on older TV shows where they had like a little blurb at the start of the show, like what the conceit is. Like that might have been really helpful. I have to think of actually Nerd Commendation from a few weeks ago, Castle. I was rewatching Castle a few weeks ago with Nathan Fillion, and for the first few seasons, they always had a little like 20-second blurb at the start that was like, "Hey, I'm a writer, and I am shadowing this cop," and it just kind of like summed up who the characters were really fast in a few seconds. I almost feel like this show would benefit from that, because I get the vibe that a lot of episodes could be an entry point because of the way the humor works in this show, if you can get a hold of who these characters are quickly. So I guess my biggest criticism would be like add something at the start that tells me who these people are a little bit, so I can jive with any episode quickly, I guess.
As long as we don't take away from that banger of a theme song.
That is quite something. That is a real good theme song, yeah.
All right, so what surprised you the most?
I guess what surprised me the most is how graphic it was in a couple of places, and how good the makeup was on Doug Jones as the bear, and it actually reminded me a little bit of the Master on the first season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That level of fugly vampire doesn't exist very often anymore in pop culture, regrettably. I ride for fugly vampire. Like, I guess because I'm a big fan of horror anyways, I'm of the contingent of make vampires scary again, you know? Like many creatures of horror lore, vampires have been sort of ironed out and prettified, like the twilight of it all.
Yeah.
Vampires sparkle now, and it takes sort of the scariness out of them a little bit. And I'm much more into something like the old, like, oh man, what was his name? The guy who played Nosferatu in the old silent film. Like, that makeup is just absolutely spotless, even though it's 100 years old. Like, making vampires scary and terrifying, is awesome. And so that they leaned that far into that in a comedy, especially, I thought was really, really cool, and creates a very, very cool contrast between what he looks like and how weird he gets. I don't think you've lived until you've seen an absolutely terrifying looking vampire do karaoke. I think that's just special, like. So I guess that was the biggest surprise for me, is that they actually leaned into the horror element and the terrifying element. A lot of blood smeared on mouths after they eat people and stuff, and the makeup job. That they actually leaned into the horror stuff as much as the humor. I really appreciated.
Yeah, it's funny because I couldn't help but see Lieutenant Saru um, with with the Baron. Like some of Doug Jones's like finger movements and the way he walks, he just can't help himself.
Yes. I actually got flashbacks to Pan's Labyrinth. It took me about 2 seconds to realize who he was.
Yep.
God, he's so good in Pan's Labyrinth too. I'm a huge Doug Jones fan. Tangent. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I met Doug Jones at a comic book convention many, many moons ago, and he was amazing. And this is God, right around the time of Pan's Labyrinth, I think. So before Saru and all of that, and he was a class act. He's just a really cool dude.
Man, I remember having to watch that in Spanish courses in college like 3 or 4 times. And
Hey,
that's
there are worse movies to have to watch. I'm telling you.
that was before I got Brave now, so I was pretty spooked.
Yeah, it's fantastic though. I'm telling you.
So we kind of touched on this a little bit with one of your previous answers, but what continuity issues did you encounter?
Yeah, continuity wise, it's just understanding who these characters are. I think it almost would have benefited me to do some Googling ahead of time. Like, before we started recording, I actually did a little bit of Googling just to get to know these characters. And I'm like, oh, so this Guillermo guy is human. He's not a vampire. He's like their human servant. Okay, cool. And that guy's name is Laszlo, and he's married to Nadia. Oh, that's good to know. Is Nandor not the goofiest guy ever?
He's my favorite character in fiction over the past 10 years. I love him so much. He's perfect.
He is such a goofball. Like, when they're sitting around, and the Baron is like, yeah, I even thought about killing you guys tonight, and he's like, funny story, we thought about killing you too, and the whole table gets quiet, and I'm like, dude, foot in mouth all the way.
Yep. That's my guy.
So yeah. But yeah, that just like getting to know these characters a little bit. I think I'm gonna circle back around and watch a few of the earlier episodes today, and kind of get a sense for these characters a little more.
All right, so that leads us right into it. Do you see yourself watching more?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like the weird stuff. That's no secret to longtime listeners, and I like horror stuff, and I like a weird sense of humor, and this definitely hits a sweet spot. There's only 50 episodes, so it's not like a huge commitment or something. I'm very interested to see more, and see if it can, that vibe I got watching it, if it can maintain that long term, because it was sort of a surreal experience watching it. I'm curious to see how they how they keep that spark alive, so to speak, over multiple episodes, or if it kind of just like flattens out and becomes sort of routine. I'm very curious to see how they keep that up. So yeah, I'm definitely watching more.
All right, that wraps our Byword Big Talk. Do you want to send us home, Dave?
I sure will. Next up, after a quick break, we are going to be back with some nerd commendations. And we're going to be very on brand, so prepare yourself. All right, and we're back, and it's time for everybody's favorite segment of the Nerd Byword. It's time for... All right, Kris, I'm actually very, very interested to hear about your nerd commendation this week because I'm a big fan of the writer, and I have not checked this out yet. So, is it any good?
Yeah, it's really, really good. So if you're a fan of the animated series Spectacular Spider-Man, which was developed by Greg Weisman, of Gargoyles fame, a show that's near and dear to our hearts, he has returned to the world of Spider-Man, but with the comic series, The Spectacular Spider-Men, which is a team-up book with Peter and Miles Morales, which is just a lot of fun hijinks and stuff that fans of both characters have been wanting, like that mentorship, big brother, little brother kind of vibe for quite a while. And when you have one of my favorite spider artists of all time, Humberto Ramos, on the title, then you know it's going to be a good time. There's a lot of hijinks that happen, a lot of quips, a lot of fun stuff that happens, a lot of shock value covers. We're looking at you, issue 3. But it's a really cool kind of connected storyline that I've been really, really enjoying and definitely recommend.
I'm actually really interested in reading this because it hits several spots. First, I think Spectacular Spider-Man was an absolute banger of a cartoon. It is probably the Spider-Man cartoon that I missed the most, and it got caught up in the whole like buying and selling and corporate takeover stuff. I really, really wished we would have gotten more seasons of that. Two, I'm a huge fan of Greg Weisman because if you did Gargoyles, you're a hero in my book because that show was a huge part of my childhood and just hugely influential on me in about 40 different ways. And finally, I think the premise of this book hits a spot that's way overdue. If you're going to take Miles and move him into the 616, then there should be, a relationship between Miles and Peter. But it always felt in the main Spidey books like they're kind of dancing around each other, right? Like they kind of dip in and out of each other's lives without ever really building any kind of meaningful relationship to each other. And I thought that was such a missed opportunity. So seeing that they're actually trying to do a book now where they're diving into their relationship a little bit, I'm very, very grateful for that. And now you telling me that it's actually good makes me want to definitely check it out. So I'm definitely here for this one.
I'm in the minority on the animated series. Something about the eyes always creeped me out, so I never got more than a couple episodes in. But I might need to give it another shot because it's been so well received. Um, but yeah, with Peter and Miles' relationship, we've gotten morsels and crumbs here and there, but to finally have a sit down meal with the two of them, it's long overdue, and it's really well done here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just psyched to check it out. Then I've had some issues, haha, pun intended, lately. Reading a lot of comics just because of timing and stuff, and I'm trying to get back into it, as you will see in my nerd commendation this week. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and put Spectacular Spider-Man at the top of my list to get caught up on.
All right, so you're nothing if not consistent. Go ahead.
More Doctor Who, everybody. More Doctor Who. I came to this one in a really weird way. I actually was perusing Humble Bundle, one of my favorite websites for getting a whole bunch of video games cheap or a whole bunch of books or comic books cheap. And they had a very cool bundle recently of Doctor Who comic books. Doctor Who comic books are sort of a weird proposition. Some of them are quite good, and some of them are, decidedly less so. And then I came across one that immediately caught my eye in this bundle, and I was like, ooh, I need to check this out as soon as possible. It's called Doctor Who Empire of the Wolf. And even you, Kris, are going to find something interesting about this, I think. So let me go ahead and read you the synopsis. When searching for his next adventure, the 8th Doctor meets a strange young woman from another universe, Rose Tyler. He has no idea the destiny they share, but makes it his mission to discover what brought her here and how to get her home. Meanwhile, the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, is summoned by a mysterious empress plagued with visions of another life. It's Rose Tyler, but not the one he knows. Hailing from an alternate timeline and trapped here alone, she has become a liberator, conqueror, and now empress. And when she finds out she's not the only Rose in the universe, something must be done. Bursting straight out of the long-running hit television series, this Doctor Who collection continues the time-traveling tales of the Doctor and his friends. This was actually written by Jodie Hauser, who knocks it out of the park. Her Rose Tyler is spot on. Her Matt Smith Doctor is spot on. And what is really, really difficult to nail, and I'll explain why here in a second, her 8th Doctor is spot on. Now, a very, very brief primer on the 8th Doctor. Doctor Who was initially cancelled for many years during the tenure of the 7th Doctor. There was a TV movie that was supposed to try to revive the franchise in the 90s, featuring the 8th Doctor, that was not successful, and the 8th Doctor sort of faded into oblivion, except with some novels, and with Big Finish, a company that does audio dramas out of England. And the original actor has been continuing making audio dramas with Big Finish of the adventures of the 8th Doctor for many, many years. I don't even want to know how Jodie Hauser managed to nail the 8th Doctor. I'm a huge fan of the 8th Doctor. He's one of my all-time favorites, and I'm a big fan of all the audio plays. I constantly am listening to them, almost as much as I listen to stuff from Audible. And so it's just like pitch perfect, having the 8th Doctor and the 11th Doctor meet, having Rose Tyler in the mix, who is familiar to one of the Doctors but not to the other because they're two different points in the timeline, and then an alternate universe Rose Tyler who took a very different path in her life. And it all blends together in a perfect 4-issue miniseries. If you're at all a Doctor Who fan of any era of Doctor Who, if you're a fan of Matt Smith, you definitely get something that's worth your money here. If you're a fan of the Eccleston era or the Tennant era and Rose Tyler, you get something there. And if you're a fan of the very obscure 8th Doctor era, there's a lot to love here too. The art here is by Roberta in Granada and is pitch perfect. Absolutely beautiful art in that it is not an attempt to be sort of a photorealistic imitation of the actors, but really sort of a cartoony interpretation of their likeness. It works incredibly well. And the book is absolutely gorgeous. One of my biggest criticisms usually of Doctor Who comic books is that the art is sort of all over the place. Some artists do an incredible job, and then some of the art feels a little phoned in. Not here. This is probably one of the most gorgeous-looking Doctor Who comics that I have read. It is the entry point, I think, to good Doctor Who comics. So if you're at all into Doctor Who, this comes highly recommended. Doctor Who Empire of the Wolf.
It's pretty awesome, and I'm a big fan of Jodie Hauser's work. I love what she did with Renew Your Vows Spider-Man books. So yeah,
absolutely,
that's something to definitely look into once I completely immerse myself here.
Alrighty, folks, there you have it. That's it for episode 192 of the Nerd Byword podcast. If you like what you just heard, get on your favorite podcasting platform, give us a rating, give us a review, and subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms and, of course, our very own spiffy website, currently being rebuilt from scratch again, nerdbyword.com.
And you can always find us on social media at Nerd Byword across all socials, or individually that Nerd David, that Nerd Kris. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.